responding. There we go.
July 24th. Well, that's been a long time coming. That's what you're shooting for in the state of operation.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our Wednesday afternoon workshop for the Cowlitz County Board of Commissioners. On our agenda today is a review of what's going on with the state legislature. Commissioner Dahl represents Cowlitz County on the Washington State Association of Counties Legislative Steering Committee. And I think you've gone to two meetings so far. And of course, when the session is in the legislature, the first month or so, everybody's introducing bills and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas get thrown out there. And then the committees start work. And I think it was last Friday was the deadline for subject matters to clear at least the subject matter committees. And about the only thing left alive are those who've come out of committee or bills that have something to do with the budget, something connected with finance. So still a lot, but the first cutoff has already occurred, and we get an idea of where the legislature is headed. WSAC, of course, is interested in representing the interests of county governments and making sure we're treated fair. We always like to think of ourselves as partners with the state in so many of the different things that we are expected to do and accomplish. But if you talk to some legislators, they will tell you quite directly, no, you work for us. We make the rules. And all too often that is the case. And it's always something difficult to put our heads around. And it is amazing some of the thought processes that go in with those folks who control the legislature. So without any further ado, we'll turn the meeting over to Rick and have us walk through some of the priorities.
It's, as I mentioned to Chairman Weber, when I walked in, I got a new sheet this morning that changes quickly this time of year, and our chair has been doing this for a long time, so hopefully he'll pop in when he sees things that I'm sure he'll have better comment than I on some of these. So the first part is really, they call it priority bills, county support, and that's the majority of counties. Oftentimes, there'll be times when counties in the more urban areas and counties in more rural areas have difference in opinions on things, but for the most part, these are things, whether your particular county utilizes it or not, that we support for counties. The first one is 1267, and that basically extends the current 0.09 rebate of the state portion of local sales tax. It's not an additional tax. It's just a refund of a portion that the state gets for local sales tax, 0.09. And it can come back to public facility districts for work in our areas. I think it started in 1998. It's been in place for 25 years. Do the math. And they're looking to extend that out. I think in Cowlitz County, it's been a good thing for us. We have a facilities district. In fact, I have a meeting with them at 3 today after this. So it's been a good thing for us.
So a little bit of history about our public facilities district. The county appoints a board of directors for this public facilities district. And they have done 3 projects. One is the oversight of the Cowlitz Event Center. We provide the staffing, they provide the financing as well as the fees that come in to pay for the cost of service. And that was a major upgrade at the Cowlitz County Fairgrounds that have made it possible for that piece of property, prime real estate, to be used more than just the week of the fair. And that's been pretty successful. The second one was in cooperation with the city of Longview, a rehabilitation of the Columbia Theater building, which was in need of earthquake protection, as well as other maintenance and upgrades. And so that we've got a good relationship with the city through the EFD. And the third one was a little bit much smaller scale, and that was some contributions to ball fields in Kelso. Some remodel, we helped contribute some money to that. So a great program. And by extending the law, there's a possibility that we can borrow funds for a big project. They've got some ideas in mind, and we'll be able to pay it off with the extended time.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, it's not a new tax. It's just we get to keep a portion of the tax that would normally go to the state and keep it in our county, which is a good thing. I think it kind of was designed after when they did Safeco Field, or it's not called Safeco anymore,
No,
but
that's right. It's an offshoot of that whole program. Yeah.
SSB 5353 is scheduled for a hearing on the 15th. I guess that's today.
Okay, yeah.
And a session on the 17th. It's a bill to allow counties to opt into a voluntary stewardship program. Currently 27 of 39 counties participate. I don't know if we participate or not.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And it's a successful program protecting ecosystem functions on agricultural lands. So 1425. This bill would renew annexation sales tax credits for cities, incentivizing more annexation of developed lands in UGAs.
So those tend to be counties that plan under the GMA requirements.
Yeah, which we don't.
Correct. We have UGAs, but they're not the same as in the other counties.
1460 looks like it implements recommendations of the Trust Land Transfer Work Group and WSAC's Encumbered Lands Proviso Work Group, creates a program for replacing non-performing and underperforming trust lands.
So that is a project that I contributed to last year. There was a proviso in the budget last year for some money to be set aside to purchase private timberlands for use by the state for counties who are losing the benefits of state-owned timberland because of the marbled murrelet taking up a lot of acreage, and it's set aside. So they're allowing the state to do that. So one of the subcommittees I worked on last year was designed to set up the guidelines. The proviso provided that counties had to be in agreement before this kind of transfer takes place. And I spent some time working with them on that because 2 of our neighbors are the ones that don't have very much timberland or taxable land. Wahkiakum County and Skamania County to the west. Skamania is not just marbled murrelet, but it's other factors, and most of the timberland in Cowlitz County is privately owned. So I'm thinking, all right, we need to be sure that we have a say in that transfer. So it came out And I think they tacked those provisions on another bill, looking for a way for the state to divest themselves of some poor performing real estate.
1515 is scheduled for public hearing in the Senate. It's a bill that requires healthcare authorities to adopt regional standards for behavioral health networks managed by managed care organization. Regional standards trying to attempt to ensure timely and accurate access to care. Basically, there's no current standards are basically non-existent, so they're trying to put some in place. Sounds
So
reasonable on
again,
the
another
surface.
organization that I represent the county on is the Great Rivers Behavioral Health Organization. It's one of those regions that oversees the behavioral health spending for Medicaid. That's medical insurance for low-income families. And the money flows to private companies, managed care organizations, and they contract with local providers. The BHOs are in a position to say there are gaps, there are things being missed, and we need to have some standards to make sure that particularly folks in the rural areas like Great Rivers get the coverage that we're entitled to. So that's another high priority program.
5604. Scheduled for executive session on the 17th, which should be Friday, I guess. The bill allows local governments to expand the use of the revenues from the chemical dependency and mental health treatment program sales and use tax to modify existing facilities to address health and safety needs necessary for the provision of the program. It also allows local governments to retain 10% of the fund for administrative costs related to the tax. So would that help with, like, if we wanted to?
So currently we have a 1/10%.
Yeah.
There are some restrictions on what we can use it for. This will broaden
Is that the one coming up later this year?
that's the one that's coming up later
So
for us.
this is helping us. We can broaden the scope of that to
To do capital.
maybe
programs.
remodel a building or something. Gotcha. Okay.
The one thing we have to be careful of is that a program like this gives the state an excuse not to spend those capital improvement dollars. Because, oh, you've got some you can spend,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden we lose control. And right now we're spending most of ours, as we talked about, for programs with our criminal justice system.
Yeah.
So
I,
it's one of those conflicts with the values and the priorities.
I've been to 2 of those meetings and listened in on another, and the that's a theme I hear quite often. Well, if you don't take advantage of everything we give you, then we're not going to give you. You know, so
Oh, yeah.
that seems to be a fairly common thing. So those are the priority items for WSAC, which is our lobbying arm for counties. Bills that have some concerns, they're not necessarily against them. There's just pieces in those bills that create concerns. One of them is 5726. It's in the bill requires the wages of public works contracts to be paid a prevailing wage in effect when the work is performed. That's the part that gives us a little bit of heartburn. There's prevailing wage provisions in our contracts now, but the prevailing wage provision now is when the contract signed, then those wages will be prevailing wage for that contract. This would change it to when the work is done. So if you have a long contract and you're 6-7 months in it and the prevailing wage changes, it can change the contract. So that's kind of the issue that WSAC and we have with that, is that you could be paying out different amounts over the term of the contract. The other kind of a one that goes along with that is 1050. It's a bill that require public work contracts awarded by a municipality above $1 million to include no less than 15% of the labor hours performed by apprentices. There's some of that in contracts now, and I can't remember where it's at, but the concern we have with it is in some counties, it may be difficult to find apprentice to match that. And so they've been trying to get some language in there that for counties that have that struggle as a way in opt out. So we're not tied to that. We don't think it's a bad idea, I think, to use apprentice, but some of the smaller ones may have issues or have troubles meeting that.
I may be wrong. It's been a while since we've studied this issue, but I think our standard by policy is 10% if available.
I think that's true.
So there's that kind of language in there for that. But so this would increase that requirement to 15%. And it doesn't seem to have language of if available. That's a key word. So Commissioner, you've mentioned a couple of times something called executive sessions. So the committees hold public hearings and take public testimony. The executive sessions are then where they get together in a less formal setting. That's where they go through and make the word changes and strike the compromises. Between the executive sessions and the formal hearing is when our lobbyists get together with those legislators and tries to suggest language that'll improve the bills so we can support it. So if the phrase "if available" needs to be added, this would be the time that you try to get it added into the mix. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because there are other lobbyists doing exactly the same thing. So
yeah. And we have I've learned WSAC, Washington State Association of Counties, has 4 of them that speak to us up there, and they all one covers health issues and one covers, they kind of specialize in the areas that they cover. One covers kind of county governments. I think Axel is in that, and Juliana covers health issues. And so they specialize, but they work with all this type of stuff. 5536. The bill makes knowing possession and gross demeanor and encourages diversion and substance use disorder treatment, among other things. Counties and cities were now faced with significant costs related to updating comprehensive plans, training law enforcement, change in jail beds, loss of revenues, and all kinds of things. And the issue we have like that is this is one of those, they call it unfunded mandates. They're going to pass some stuff on to us that we have to do, but not provide funding source for that. And it falls directly on the county to find the funding source. And that's the issue on this. The implementation costs are likely to exceed $5 million. And the counties as a whole, I don't think want to be responsible for ponying up with that.
So it is interesting. There's almost a separate code on the bill numbers. And this one in particular has been worked on and worked on and worked on.
Yeah.
It's E2SSB, and that simply means engrossed second substitute Senate bill. So that just tells you this is something that's been worked on and worked on. A second substitute is several reiterations of what was originally. This is the bill that is an attempt to try to undo some of the problems that occurred last year when they went through and revised the rules on drug possession and drug treatment, and limiting how the police can enforce the law. So there's a big argument going on within the majority caucus on which formula they can all support, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it without costing us an arm and a leg at the local level.
Another one that is Not supported concerns because it's another unfunded mandate would be 5046. This bill would provide the Office of Public Defense funding to appoint counsel for personal restraint petitions for certain individuals without providing funding for the costs associated with prosecutor time. So that's another one that's an unfunded type mandate, and we have concerns with unfunded mandates, passing those on to the county. Ones that the WSAC opposes. 1324 is it's includes sentencing, and it goes back to prior juvenile dispositions in a person's offender score calculations. When you have things as it happened to you as a juvenile, you collect points, is what I understand. And those points, then when you become adult and you commit a crime and you're sentenced, those points are calculated into the sentence. Well, this one would take those points off. And what that would mean is anybody sentenced as an adult, with part of it being used, these juvenile points would have to be resentenced because the points would go away. So it's just you're looking at, it's estimated at about 7.3 million cost per year to do these resentencing. It's real similar to the costs associated with the Blake cases. So we oppose that. 1337, it involves accessory dwelling units. We just feel it's far too prescriptive. It imposes a requirement that local governments comply with agency guidance that has yet to be created, rather than through rulemaking or legislative action. So we oppose it mainly on that. It's not that I'm against accessory dwelling units, but I think county should have more say in what they want to do with that.
The language they use is accessory dwelling units. It basically eliminates single family dwelling zones.
Yeah.
You can't have it anymore because
Yeah.
every lot can have one or two or more, which is not appropriate for most counties. It may be just fine up in Seattle area where it's so densely populated, but doesn't make sense here.
Yeah. And another one also relates to that, 5232 creates a one-size-fits-all approach to mandates for accessory dwelling units that simply, don't work well in unincorporated areas. So our counties are so diverse, King and Pierce are so huge and diverse, from like Franklin and Okanagan and even us, honestly, that a one-size-fits-all just doesn't work.
So when they talk about unincorporated UGAs, that applies for counties planning under GMA, Growth Management Act. And that term UGA carries with it very, very, very powerful provisions that cities can actually require annexation for those living beyond their borders. The reason I bring that up is we have a unique situation in Washington State where the city of Woodland, because about 65 people live in Clark County, they are planning under the UGA laws, and they have expanded their UGA. They've talked about expanding it because they want to annex.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the middle of a dispute right now. Hopefully this bill doesn't become a vehicle for something that goes against the county's interest.
Right.
And expanding it, something to look for. Look, it could also be a vehicle for solving the dilemma that we're under also. So kind of make sure you keep a lookout for that.
And the last one that's on the bills to oppose is 5466, and it's a statewide preemption for requiring off-street parking for development within a station area. We don't agree that removing all off-street parking requirements for due development is a reasonable standard in many cases. And those type of decisions need to be left to the local elected officials. So that's
Great.
I'll probably have more stuff from tomorrow. It's not on the screen, but I also gave a list of you can tell the things that they're especially passionate about is they write position letters, and there's a position letter modernizing the justice to support and promote recovery. And it's basically they want state funding to put together and do analysis on our jails, and a lot of things we do with probably stemming some from the Blake decision, and just over time, the changes that have been having, that our jails, and we hear it quite often, are not as efficient as a lot of the public would like to hear. So there is a position paper out there that's saying we wouldn't be opposed to a true study to kind of look over some of that. Federal Transportation Fund Exchange is another position paper that they have, and I think we could take advantage. I think Susan spoke to this a little bit, and it's basically you can swap your federal fund dollars for state fund dollars, and the reason that would be a benefit is a lot of federal funding comes with additional regulation process, and it's just, it seems like there's more red tape when you're dealing with the feds and with the state. I know that's hard to believe at times, but it is. So this would actually be a benefit to counties to cut some of the red tape when they want to get some projects done. And
So we had an interesting example of that unnecessary language. We had a requirement from the feds to update our civil rights promise against anti-discrimination. And then about a month later, the state came along and said the same thing for the state funding.
yeah,
And so that might be an example where we could streamline the whole process.
yeah. And the last position paper, and it shows you how it goes back to the facilities district, which we talked about earlier, extending that tax rebate back to the counties to 2054. So
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
We may have, after tomorrow's meeting, there may be some more, but
Sure. Oh, yeah, it'll be that way until
you know,
session ends, and that's supposed to be towards the end of April. That's assuming they get their work done, and that's assuming the governor doesn't call a special session.
yeah,
I have yet to see it not turn into at least one special session, so.
when they started with roughly 1,600 bills, and I think I mentioned a couple of times, the first page of bills that WSAC was looking at was 84, 85 pages long, double-sided. So that's a lot of work the organization does to keep track of, and they whittle it down. I was at Senator Wilson's town hall on Saturday, and I was disappointed to hear his kit home bill failed. It looked like it was on its final stages, and then it was a bill for kit homes under 800 square feet and under that were manufactured to a certain specification, could be erected on people's property by the owner, or they could have it built on there, whatever, and it would just be done without a lot of regulation and code. And it got killed at the very last because the code writers in the state thought they were losing power and had it pulled. That here's an unelected group that is worried about losing power, and they have this pulled. So a little disappointing. I'll continue to look if maybe we can word some of that wording into county and help people around here. But I was really looking forward to that coming through the state. It looked like it was going to till the last minute, but that's how it works.
So these are kits that would be built by contractors or built by the homeowners? Because that
They would be
because-
designed and done to code by the contractor or manufacturer or something. And then the homeowner, if they had the ability, could erect it themselves, or they could have somebody erect it.
So a few weeks ago, Ron Kozlowski talked about a grant that he had received to remodel some apartments in downtown Longview. And he had quoted I think an 8,000 per unit cost, which is pretty inexpensive for a remodel.
Yeah.
And because we had just talked about the prevailing wage restrictions that raises the cost of production. And he said, we didn't contract it out. We did it all ourselves. So we didn't have to follow those guidelines.
Right.
That's why I asked if this one allowed homeowners to do the final construction and place it.
It could.
That might have raised the hackles of certain groups that want prevailing wage rules extended.
It doesn't have to be on a foundation, and it would be livable for a decade, 10 years. The idea is to get started, and then if you bought 5 acres, you couldn't afford a home, you could put one of these on and develop your land type thing.
Interesting. Well, anything of particular interest for Cowlitz County?
You know, the one they keep pushing in our county, from what I understand, would not have participated in it, at least at this point, is they keep trying to, and they've worked on it for quite a while. It's one of these things that some counties are strongly in favor of it and other counties don't want to participate in it, but they can see the benefit to some, so it gets supported. And that's the changing of the 101, the limiting of the property tax to 1% a year. It would go to a 100% plus an inflation factor, plus a new building factor, up to a maximum of 103%. It got as far as it's ever gone this year. There was actually some kind of hope it might come through, which places like King and Pierce were really had their pom-poms out and cheering for, but it didn't make it. So it'll be back next year. That's the one thing that comes to mind. I heard a lot of talk about that disappeared.
Any indication of movement on our request for funds for Tower Road? The Tower Road culvert replacement?
Yeah, not that I've heard. I had a great conversation with our lobbyist, our
Josh?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Met him down in Woodland, had a cup of coffee, and I know that they're fighting for that for us.
Mhm.
And he's actually the priorities you kind of went over them the other day. The silt problems from Mount St. Helens that we're going to be dealing with forever and working on fun with that. And he was talking about, he actually gave you kudos because you guys had met and got some of that started again. But it's in appropriation. So every year they got to ask for it.
Yeah.
It's a long-term problem. It should just be there. But then we talked about the Riderwood. I know that's a priority with their water system and Tower Road. So I think on a federal level, we're working on the projects that I think they're important to Cowlitz County for sure.
All right, awesome. Great. Is there anyone listening in who has a question or comment? All right. Got one question. Contract language must have a clause that states wage reductions can be used if wage raises are used in the contract.
Maybe that's in reference to the prevailing wage bill.
Yeah, right. I don't think that's a question. That's just a statement. So
Yeah.
thank you for that comment. All right, seeing nobody else with hands raised, I guess we are done for this afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.